Hmm. Welcome, welcome. It's me, Suze, as you know. Where is Mr. Wrinkles? You know what? I'm going to have such a hard time tonight. I've been thinking about it for the last, 7, 8 minutes, thinking, what the hell, Suze? Stay offline. Just resist the temptation to do what you're being driven to do. So, has he been sold for profit? They created him for profit. What a sad story. Put 100 pounds of weight on like 6 inches of legs. And, you know, when they mix those breeds and do that creepy shit, a lot of these dogs really aren't as strong as you would hope. Like they would have an Achilles heel, let's say. And Mr. Wrinkles, believe it or not, when he was, about 3 years old, he got run over, tagged, hit, struck by a car. And he made it home. And he was, laying out back crying. But we were very fortunate. There was a doctor here in Missouri, maybe 35, 40 minutes away. He had been a human doctor, and his dog had gotten hit. It was kind of a weird story, but this was a long time ago in his world. And anyhow, there was no vets that could do it, and he said, I'm a surgeon, yickety squack, I'll do it. And then the next thing you know, he becomes like an orthopedic surgeon for animals. And it was really pretty cool. They put Mr. Wrinkles' leg back together a long time ago. And then with the proper massage techniques, what Joe did was spent a lot of time massaging the fascia from where the scar is, because it's a pretty long scar. You don't want the scar tissue to form to the bone, obviously. And he got pretty much, more than 90%. There's one place that, has that connect still where it is painful for him. And sometimes he hobbles because he is getting older. But Mr. Wrinkles is just fine. Welcome, Hero Gab. I was chatting with Jimmy there. But what we're going to talk about beyond Mr. Wrinkles' leg and his current health status is a couple anniversaries that I really don't particularly enjoy. And, I'm not really the kind of holiday kind of girl anyhow. I don't believe in a lot of those rituals because it's just over commercialized and bullshit spun around, and no wonder everything had to come to a screeching halt. Anything we talk about tonight is going to kind of, ram us into the wall, but I've got a few quick little things, and then we'll get into the big thing. But, if I was anybody else, the big thing would be, what's going on in the other twin sister city. And of course, anything I bring up tonight is going to be stories that come from my own, and I know everybody thinks it's funny, or that whatever game is going on is playing out. But we've talked about the plug-in algorithm program and how it is a real thing. I'm not teasing at all. But of course, the story that we're dealing with, George Floyd, would be so much reminiscent of what didn't happen with Mike Brown here in Ferguson. And even though I'll talk about it where I differ from most people, is I'm actually talking about real life experiences, no matter how crazy they sound. And I, that's why they needed me to do this. And I know that sounds stupid that they asked me, "Hey, Suze, blah, blah, blah." And I've told that story. And here again, it just sounds so supernatural and bizarre. And tonight's stories are going to sound like that a fair amount. So, anyhow, I do have a couple of funny videos, I guess, and I'll try to break it up because, like I said, I just didn't even, dare step out. And it's very ominous and quiet here in Ferguson. And, you know, it's dusk and the sun's going down. And even though the story is really all about, oh, what would we say, up to 13 different states, major cities having things pop off. Each one is huge. And, with what I've been through with reading the screen and getting immersed in the story and really looking for the truth and seeing how it's all connected, sometimes I guess it is funny, but it's that old story, don't kill the messenger, but ah ha ha, she's already dead. And it's like, okay. But maybe you're interested in the book that I got this hot picture from. Maybe not. We'll talk about that shortly. Is there anything else I want to say? Probably not so much. But one of the content creators that I watch over, just get the intel, see what's going on, said that it would go up to 30 of these places popping off tonight. So, here again, and I know it's funny, we can laugh at me, I guess, all the time, but oh, that's right, I'm not relevant enough to even laugh at or anybody to know the bigger story. But when it happened here in Ferguson, and we were militarized, and there really were big tanks on the street with the like satellite looking EMP kind of, put out the the warfare that would be crowd control used for wrong purposes. And I mean, maybe there's right purposes, inquiring minds want to know. But the one night, and I do have the book to have the exact date, it's in August. And it's like the 23rd. right before all hell broke loose. Everybody was singing and everybody was in harmony and walking up the street, and my dumb ass, you know, I always do believe in the good coming through. And of course, that's the reason to stop me in any shape, way, or form. I'm very dangerous because, you know, I see a different future. It makes me too many things to crab about, you know. But it wasn't what it appeared to be. Now, whether or not people would want to blame the local government or even the state government, of course, as you follow the money and climb the chain and, you know, dance around with Soros for a while, you realize that that's what they call this paid protesting. And then the whole question of what's intimidating or what's funny or what's emotional. Isn't that wild how there's a helicopter now? I mean, we have a lot of fighter jets too. It's an odd thing. We're in protected airspace because of the St. Louis International Airport. But, you know, like I've said, it's been a war zone for a long time, and what my experience has shown me from living in the same place my whole life is to see how destruction happens, who and what it gets blamed on, where people go, and how business ceases to exist, or a population. Welcome, PNR audiobooks. Yeah, so I'm a little, you know, it's like nobody can say anything, but you know that that's not my problem. Um, what it's really all about is the intent and what they're learning about us as far as pretty much everything on every level. And in the end, somebody's going to say, nah, nah, boo boo. It was this simple. We told you this, and you made it into some new weirdo, new age, fucktard, conspiracy theory spinning nonsense just to hide the truth that people aren't really ready to deal with it. And sometimes your life is like that. So when big traumatic things happen, and most people just don't really bring it into their life in any way. And on YouTube these days, you know, all the different communities, you know, especially if you're into the drama community and things like that, they say, but, you know, when you bring it into my real life, well, and, you know, here again, I'm stuck in that Ferguson state of existence, you know, where that's exactly what was done to me, but they don't know me by name because I'm irrelevant. And then they make up different names for these people. They get in these fights, and of course, they're connected to all the phony accounts, and everything goes round and round, and all the arguments. But back to um, this book, I was trying to relax before coming online, and I'm listening to that daggum Jimmy Dore. And there's just too many things to say about him, but he was talking all sexual and like, a little freaky deaky. And it's like, Jimmy Dore needs to wrap his mind around this book because everything he says, he acts like he doesn't know me. But here again, maybe he doesn't even know who he is. What the hell do I know? It's so weird who people are online and how you find how very few people are actually online and one person will be a main voice in each of the different communities to work this. It's, you know, to just say a word like Ponzi scheme, that's not really good enough for it. Because in my world, where I came from a serious business background and really always did care about all the subjects and always knew the downside to everything that I was stepping in and knew how political it was. And it shouldn't be political, especially in hairdressing, but oh, it is. So that was always a nightmare. But it's funny. My cosmetology book, that of course we all have to study from and take this test, tells you right in the beginning you never talk about sex, politics, or religion. And let's be honest, whether you're going in an establishment, that caters to men, which would be one conversation, or to ladies, which would be another conversation, and that would kind of break off into subgroups of ladies, right? Different, easy to identify groups, let's say. And they fit in, like socioeconomic location wise. And you want to be able to service the population, which back in the day, hmm, all there was that old song says it all. The world is black, the world is white. And that's really, I would say, how prejudice manifested in the days of motion pictures and film footage. For some reason, it's a huge deal. Like, when something big happens and the first time it's caught on film and documented. Otherwise, it's just fiction. And then you say, well, this is all, a crock of shit. And at that point, I say there's no way it can all be a crock of shit. It's too perfect in the intent, both negative and positive. And then there's so much interference from people that are just basically afraid. And I totally get that. A long time ago, I tried to explain it that it doesn't matter, like if you hear a story, obviously that you couldn't judge one trauma over the other. But when you hear a story that you deem too traumatic to tell, you think, now who's the genius that deemed that the law of the land? Because there's no way there could be a rule book for that. And then you have to think about how many groupings and all the different special interest and all these things. And then in the meantime, to know how easy they use division to separate people that should be connected by their beliefs and their morality and their intentions. And then to see that like all blown out of proportion, and at the same time for people to buy into it. So I don't know if that made any sense, but this book with the wild artwork, believe it or not, back in the day, they had to hide the natural method for birth control in sociology books. And these were, of course, at the university level. So this is such an old, rare book. It's anthropology study of Professor Paulo Montagazza and its sexual relations of mankind. Of this edition, a limited number have been privately issued by the anthropological branch of the Falstaff Press for exclusive subscriptions of adult students of anthropology. The translation is by James Bruce. The book is printed on handmade, finished, deck-edged paper specially manufactured for this edition. This copy is registered at the office of the publisher, and that's out of New York. It says, love, the gigantic force. I have conceived love to be the most powerful and at the same time the least studied of human affections. Surrounded by a triple forecast of prejudice, misery, and hypocrisy, civilized men know it too often only through stealth and shame. Poets, artists, philosophers, legislators snatch a morsel now and then from the flesh of the great God and hurry away to conceal it as a precious booty of forbidden fruit. To study love as a phenomena of life, as a gigantic power which molds itself in 1,000 ways among varying races and in various epochs, and as an element of health for the individual and for the generations, has appealed to me as a great and worthy undertaking. And that's Paulo Montagazza again. Pretty deep. I was trying to find the year. And of course, the contents is very extensive. But the main thing we have to talk about tonight has to do, with sex. And that's deadly to talk about always. All right. So tonight is the 1 year anniversary of me surviving the hit that was perpetrated against me. And there was a high-speed chase involved. And I didn't really ever tell the story on YouTube. There was just too many things. And it sounds so, here again, unbelievable. And, it really sucks as someone that's always been self-employed to believe enough that a business could open up where you could rent spaces and do business. And of course, I'm an emporium. I've got so much cool stuff and neat ideas I've done over the years. Well, here again, I could tell you and tell you and tell you. And the funny thing is for me to be so irrelevant that I was given a presidential award in 2003 for the Small Business Advisory Council. That's kind of like when Vatterott said, "Hey, Suze, come talk to us about products." I said, "You don't want me to because, well, anyhow, their cosmetology program bottomed out. But hey, when you take and endorse just a product and whore yourself out and just teach people to only use one thing and do it one way, well, you'll see an industry collapse in. And what does that have to do with the attempt on my existence last year? I was just running and going, wasn't I? All right, so long story short, I was running a booth at this new antique mall and believing everything's going to be okay, even though I saw the signs, I saw the writing on the wall. I didn't want to be paranoid. I wanted to be positive, and it happened so fast. So I went in there in mid-April and opened up, and this is happening on May 29th of last year, so that's 2019. And there was enough going on online and all the different hijinks that happened in the political spectrum that, of course, as a hairdresser, I'm not supposed to talk about. But wait, are you kidding? Whose laws are, what is going on, and who gives a shit? Because everything's a free-for-all, so you say, why engage? Well, because you still have to document it if you're walking in my shoes, which I think is a great thing. It's called life charting. A lot of people made up fake lives and just started talking shit and spinning stories and twisting intel, but hey, it's all funny. I guess in the end, they needed me to tell everybody or that none of it's real, or that I mean, we're really like just holograms, man. I I really can't play that game either. So this experience is way too real for me, and I would never believe that anybody else's life wouldn't be as real. And so, you know, as a hairdresser, I've heard a million stories, and I really do have a keen insight in my book on how to read that. But yeah, sure. I mean, everybody gets fooled, right? So, how that fits into the antique mall. So, we got the helicopters, and we either got the gunshot or the fireworks. I figured it'd be better to be with you guys tonight because that way if shit pops off, maybe somebody would go, hey, remember Ferguson? It could just be all a joke. It could all just be a hilarious joke. All right. Back to the story. The one night I was sweeping the main floor where you walk in the mall. See, if when I ran a business and had booth runners, we were a family of sorts, kind of like communities are supposed to be here on YouTube, but it was a little more real because, like our real daily lives were intertwined together. And then you got to intertwine all the clients, and it was an incredible sociological experiment. That's for sure. So I was sweeping up the floor, and this gal was coming in, and I knew that she had to work there because she had one of their big carts and she was bringing in a lot of stuff. As she's coming through the door, all her shit goes falling off her cart, and you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna say, "Oh, let me help," because that's the kind of bitch I am, right? And remember, I'm a board certified American one too. Well, a couple cars moving down the street fast. Um, I helped her back to the back with her stuff. Her story was angry and intense, and it almost felt staged. But in the end, she admitted to being medicated, volatile. We were talking about life charting. I hit a trigger word. She followed me home out of the parking lot and tried to run the car off the road. And of course, I'm a good driver, believe it or not. Even though I do drive two-footed. That's a long story. Um, there were 2 police reports taken, and of course, the mall basically chose to, what would you call it? looked the other way because it was on their own parking lot. Although it was more than that, because when you think about code and you think about St. Louis and you think about the Manhattan Project, which started in St. Louis, and then you have an antique mall open up with space to rent called Manhattan, you go, wow, okay, so I got it. If it's not going to be, it's not going to be. And there's no arguing it. But what the weirdest thing was that the St. Anne Police, St. Anne Police Department had the computers down at the exact same time of the night that the chase began, which was 7 o'clock at night. Here we are in Ferguson, and we've been militarized since, and there are EMP weapons used here. And for the police station to be down 24 hours without a computer, that's a pretty big deal. And then they wound up being guilty of some things, and there were some illegal firearms going down. And, there's always action in St. Louis. It may not seem like a big place, but it is everything I have told you and more. I'm going to try to keep it all light. So, I had never met the gal until that day. But I've seen people get triggered, so it wouldn't have mattered if I knew her or not. It happened when they pointed the weapons during the riots with the Mike Brown stuff. It's like the same program plugging back in. Would people really expect me to look the other way when online, it gets passed around about how difficult it was to bury those police reports? Or to listen to these streams and know how much it really is some kind of a weird alternative government / media / free agents, whatever they are, to do these little intel hubs, just how weird it is. And to see how here in St. Louis that nothing that opens up seems to be what it says anymore. And I come from the day where, you proved it by actually doing the service and, running the business the way that you say it is, instead of twisting everything up or having people so freaked out because of whatever they got into as their lives were imploding, which isn't, even really their fault. But here again, when there is a group of people that want to implode it, you think, what is I think they call it like a panacea, something that could help everybody with it. And having to say out loud and publicly, which absolutely I do and did, and wrote in my own signature handwriting, the whole thing. If you have a place that's got a bunch of little separations in it and you have somebody that is mentally ill and potentially dangerous, and they say, well, we don't really care because the place is going to cave in anyhow. We're just grabbing up all y'all's shit, You think, wow, and yeah, you're proud of that, huh? But, that kind of seems like what happened on YouTube with all this chaos. It seems like it was some kind of a story grab on every level. And for people to actually try to pass a story off that is sad just to gain sympathy or views or money, I really just can't imagine it. I think it's more, like I said, whatever thing that clicked in people when my data went through the computer. You know, it seems awful wussy, doesn't it? I couldn't really imagine that either. But in the end, for people to be able to get so triggered that they would want to bring physical harm to someone that they have targeted as well as the general population, for that not to be worthy of looking into a bigger story. But it's all about white privilege right now, and everywhere I step it's landmines, and this is all I've ever known as a race war. It's weird, but there really were those years at Luther North, and it was 1979 through 1982, where it's the truth, we really did get along, and everybody has a serious story from a specific place, and so it's going to carry over into what you need to know to stay safe during this um, reopening of dangerous things like hairdressers. Ugh. See, that's why I didn't fit into the hairdresser mold to begin with. It wasn't like that I didn't know that. And being self employed was such a great way for me to get to stay me and run a legitimate business and practice my art and first do no harm, I would have never survived working in the hair industry if that wasn't my God given right. Um, when they make jokes and say those stories that curl your hair, I mean, it's a real thing. And then, you go back to it and you think, well, shit, since each different salon or barber shop has these different master storytellers and players in this live action, role playing game, right? In real life, in a real life location. Well, they're going to have different things that would put them into the category of being high risk. And that's something that always was a BFD. I mean, it's a big fucking deal, that you would never have a hairdresser work on clients who was contagious. And in the same respect, no one ever was allowed to sit in my chair when they were contagious. I'd make them leave. And, I'm sorry, man. It's it's about first doing no harm. And so you want to think about the group. Whoever's sharing space, which is, in my world, either the salon or the house. I was raising kids. I mean, as a parent, you're supposed to do that. You're supposed to keep your kids safe, And a whole war over masks. That's so tragic. Or gloves. But in the end, it's really about having your own immune system. And we've had enough time spent there over many, many shows. But nobody thought about what would be Mr. Obvious. So, Mr. Obvious is your overall health and constitution and what you put in your body. And, you give it all a percentage and go poof like that. Nobody was really thinking about what they were putting on their body. And, when I say on their body, generally I'm referring to cosmetics, beauty preparations, uh, lotions, creams, tonics, et cetera, right? Oh, and never forget quasi drugs. I bet nobody knows what a quasi drug is. Anyhow, I'll look in a minute. Back to the point of this story. This last thing is the most important, is your thoughts and your beliefs. So, like, even when I talk about the blood type eating, it's not just about that I don't eat cheeseburgers anymore, and so my friends think I went crazy. See, that's stupid. Um, there's really two other categories. So it's tough to be even interested in the conversation because there's so many things to take into account and nobody's ever really put them together yet. And that is one of the things that, of course, In a perfect world where no chaos broke out, that would have been an ongoing process through seminars and webinars. I used to do that out of the salon. But, life happened. Mike Brown happened. Um, 2010 in Ferguson happened. I mean, 2007 happened. There's a lot of things that happened since the turn of you know, this new millennium. You would think that there'd be enough people that would be at the age and have the mental capacity to realize that they have seen so many unexplainable, intensely weird realities that happen right in front of them. Why would anybody really not take that serious? And why would that be a joke? And see, of course, it's a joke that this is all just a joke and they're making a movie and none of this has really happened and no people died in hospitals, but everybody's dying. And I think, shit, man, I'll go watch the TV. In the meantime, like I told you, the TV is just like this. And to say that something doesn't, nobody really knows what the the whole thing about the end. So a lot of people say, well, nothing happened because we didn't all die in 2012. Well, that's kind of like one of them smart ass responses. Like, I'm going to disregard everything that happened that really did slowly make something extinct. Just drive another wedge, do another thing. And 2012 was huge. So, the second thing I have to talk about, unfortunately, would be that on May 31st, so that'll be Monday, that will be the 8-year anniversary when the weirdest ritual that I could ever imagine, way beyond Lord of the Rings, took place in my backyard. And my sweet troubled daughter and her tripped out dude basically GD'd us to hell and said we'd never see him again. And I get it, like people growing up and getting their independence, but this thing triggered and snapped, and that was so real. Just like what happened with Lauren. People say, oh my God, don't talk about it, don't talk about it. But it's like everybody else is saying things that are way more extreme and not even real. It's like they're mocking the thing that this is actually happening to our kids or our communities or our families. And, I think somehow I'm missing the joke. And it's all weird, you know? Like I said, these current events. And of course, don't you think it's ironic that I'm the one that people would accuse of being racist or prejudiced when I've always chose to live in an integrated area? That's a choice, and my business would have followed me wherever I located because people came from up to an hour around to get this hair color that nobody was throwing down but me. I know. Sounds impossible. I think so too. But this industry is so possessed by toxicity and bullshit and illusion and fucking crap that, now you got this crap fest breaking out basically. And, um, there's a serious discussion that needs to be had. And it's not any of the isms, it's bare bottom facts. So, ugh. And of course, that's major in Ferguson because, that's like Door. Like listening to his banter. And I know he's just poking the bear, but I wonder if he realizes that, I mean, the Democratic Party hub was here in Ferguson. And then he was acting like there's no way that could happen. It would be the opposite. And I'm thinking, how is it that as many people that have done these background checks on me and fucked with my life and done all these things, how would they not know about me in Ferguson? Because see, I'm the one that spoke out against what was hidden in the Mike Brown event and did the video. And to to have the prejudice card or sexist or racist or ageist, and to just see all the fucking shitstorm that talking about things is brought, it's like, wow. I mean, has it really gotten that bad? Or was there no turning back on one of the biggest lies ever told? I don't know. Thank you. Oh, there's many things that hairdressers aren't supposed to do. But sex, politics, and religion was always such an odd concept because, in the salon, there's always magazines. And the magazines would really have the propaganda, which is what people discuss. And when they're in groups, like you're waiting at the doctor or dentist office and you're reading magazines and talking to people out in the waiting room. Salons are always going to have a wider variety of magazines. That wouldn't be any kind of a, like we got more better shit. It's really not. It would be so interlaced into any kind of magazine that you could imagine that would fit into the clientele. If my industry has all these rules on the one side, and over here, we have every one of these rules being broken on things that I've seen that are making money on YouTube. Just most of them are private label products, which are very cheap. And since most of it is toxic anyhow, it's really, if you want to help people, let them go to the health food store. I mean, do you really have to make up a whole story like Jeffree Star does to hide outbreaks on a face or to hide zombie looking people? It's, see, that's my industry, the art of illusion. But that doesn't have to be the industry. That's one little facet, one small facet of what a professional cosmetologist may or may not choose to do. That really comes in heavy with this reopening saga because it's very different depending on specifically what one is doing. And in the meantime, it's so weird with my industry. 20 years ago, by law, we had to have formaldehyde pills in salt or pepper shakers that went in our drawers, not panties, like drawers, like on a station, like your salon station. And what it was is it was a dry sterilizer, and they would call it a fumigant. We learned in beauty school that you had to keep your formaldehyde tablet fresh because when it started crumbling, that meant that it was airborne now and that you could get poisoned with formaldehyde. And, you know, on products, formaldehyde was a very common additive into products. It's a preservative, just like what you'd expect. So you're going to get a longer shelf life if you use some really bad shit, right? And everybody was doing it. Why would anybody care? Well, the things that have been blamed on why people would perish in my industry are such a plethora of stuff. And then it even can get transdermal, which would mean a whole variety of things that we'll talk about in the video, which is so bad. And see, everybody's been making fun of it. And I'm like, why are people making fun of this shit? This is serious, But it aids and embeds a pre-planned event. And to me, it's like an intelligence test to see what people are going to do with it. And my brain used to really think that it was just some script, or that they were being puppeted, or they really had this bad agenda. I mean, to spend so much time trying to discern why would you do this. What could anybody even like think about that shit? And like here in St. Louis, in an area that's highly mixed, and when I say multicultural, that means more than just black and white. And I'm watching somebody my color's video. And it's like 2/3 of the people there are this color, but that wouldn't be. And then there's somebody that's, you know, like a different kind of flavor coming into it, getting all like specific as far as whose life matters. And oh shit, we went through this. I mean, to really think it's been 6 years ago, and that was the very thing that was going on when I first came online. And if it's not enough to get over everything that was thrown out as a hurdle, that would go back to that, and then to see how big it is right now. And then to talk about this story, you know, you may find me checking on that tonight as it goes. And at 10 o'clock, I'll make sure the news is loud. I thought it was weird earlier that the TV was loud when they were making a lot of noise. And it doesn't really seem like anything's loud now coming from the TV. Okay. So here's my story. Wait. You know, I got a new little cord because all of a sudden my cord wasn't working anymore, and it's cool. Just go get it, right? We're going to talk about hairdressing. And so I've got a theme going here, but one of the things that always irritated the hell out of me was that so many people got into hairdressing to have something to fall back on, or the idea that, well, anybody can do that. Every industry seems to have fallen prey to that very thing, but it's so much more colorful with a hairdresser. Whoever wants to play along, put your mindset in 1982. You know, early 80s. Put your head there. And so I'm graduating a small private Lutheran high school in 1982 where we all got along. I had never heard, ever, never heard of the word cocaine or AIDS. That is like one of those things that I distinctly remember because, of course, I'm transitioning and I'm going into my career, which, you know, I'm going to go to this beauty school, right? And you have to remember, I didn't even really like hairdressers, and every haircut I always got was too short, and they really didn't focus on it. But hey, I've got a big bald spot. I'm sure I freaked them out. I get it. And talking about that with people is very traumatizing to them, even if they have a colic or their hairline is messed up or they've got a bald spot. It's a big deal, and so I know this about the industry. Anyhow, I'm starting beauty school July 5th. I'm getting out of high school in June. It's just a little short time, and I start beauty school. We would go out to the bars where you could get in if you were over 18. And that summer was the first time that I heard both of those words, AIDS and cocaine. That's a that is a big expansion, you know, like from your high school knowledge. The thing about my industry, which totally breaks that rule, you know, that we talked about in the book, is that um, that's exactly what we're talking about when we go out to the bar or go out to a party. I mean, you know, music's got them all. So to act like you're not talking about it, but you're listening to music about it, that seems, you know, silly too. But when we first heard that word, so everybody was freaking out in my industry, and I was just in beauty school because all the greats, all the great hairdressers were dying of this mystery illness. And of course, the whole thing about political correctness and to act like there is a safe way to have sex is the most ridiculous oxymoron that would ever be pulled on mankind unless there were great books like this that talked about it in sociological terms and defining people's mental trauma over having conversations about body fluid exchange, body fluids in general, or organs. So, who is it?
What's up?
So you guys know about the house next door, 20 Royal. You know, involved in some kind of nefarious business, and a lot of YouTube knows about it, you know, the little real estate deals. And I mean, just imagine it. You think you want to run a fucking bed and breakfast, you want to be a business person. Okay. And you get a few friends together, they each throw in $1,000. They're going to get this house, you know, Fannie Mae, some kind of bullshit, right? Or just run some kind of thing with a bank that's on the down low. You never do know. And there's always people coming and going. But in the end, our friend is here. And it's ironic he should be here. Never any coincidences. Robert used to live on this street until they took his house away from him. And here again, talk about a lack of community at the time and the things that overtake a small town. And it does seem like some kind of fucked up Matrix movie set, you know, but this dude, as quirky as he is, he's a really good guy. And when shit hit the fan, he was wearing this referee shirt for real. And it was black and white, you know, stripes. And he was working at Little Caesars. And they usually wear a different, you know, kind of a top.
Robert said apparently there were some riots on Main Street or something.
Okay, so there,
Some type of riot.
yeah. Well, can we lock the front door?
Yeah.
Don't walk away and leave shit.
We lock the Jeep up.
Yeah, lock the Jeep up. Lock all the shit up.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
don't want to pull in the back, but
Why don't you pull it back as far as you can? Well, they're already here. So 10 o'clock at night. Get back to the story. Sorry. Here's what was tripped out about the whole deal. Because, you know, you only get a half version of any truth at any given time. So when the news was first hitting the Midwest, in St. Louis, in the industry that knew about it first, of course, the way that they would say it was, it would be a gay disease. It would be something that they would get. And you found out how full of bullshit. Like, I have to stay in my world, right?
Did all the dogs already use the bathroom?
Well, they go out back, right?
Yeah. Was everyone outside already, or?
No.
All right. I'm gonna take everyone outside. Rex just barking.
If we're in 1982,
Regals,
and I'm telling you,
Regals.
by the early 90s, that there were a lot of women who had already acquired this immune deficiency. Well, of course, all the other communities that wouldn't be black, they were saying that it was because those men were bringing it home to their women. And like even on YouTube now, there's actually conversations that I hear, which of course are, just funny. It's just a joke, but where every guy has done that and it's completely normal, and women should think it's normal. And I've been getting harassed for saying I don't think it's normal, and I don't think this girl on girl action is normal, and I just think it's all so blown out of proportion. But putting it back in the hair industry.
A couple of helicopters out.
Oh yeah, the helicopters have been watching. But in my industry, it was tame for the wild things that we saw in the hair salon and in the magazines, and how to dress and how to act and how to look, and it was okay to not know if you're a boy or a girl, and we can make you into whatever you want. That is common 101 hairdressing. And I saved some magazines that represent all those things quite well. Some of them have articles that are short. Anything that was related to what else that I know to be hazardous, which would be artificial nails, and pedicuring, any kind of blading on the face or other body parts, and waxing of private areas. That's a whole different thing, other than going to get your hair cut. And what does that have to do with a couple of hairdressers at Great Clips, and how many people they could contaminate? Well, now you're over into lifestyle, and see, we're jumping everywhere, and I'm not staying on the story. But by the late 90s, the babies were being born with it. The biggest thing I can remember about the immediate story out of the gate was the people that wondered if they had come into contact with someone that was positive, they would go to the doctor and they would say, I need to be tested. I may have shared needles with somebody. See, because it really wasn't all about sex, which is so taboo to talk about, but the CDC wants the hairdressers to hand out the pamphlets for safe anal sex. What kind of setup was that a year and a half ago? And why is it now that, of course, you'll see that there will be large percentages of particular type of businesses that cater to certain beliefs and ideas and lifestyles? You'll see it there. But it was always there, and that's the moral of the story, because if people are screaming when they hear from their doctors that there's no test and that they might test positive in a decade or 20 years, they didn't know. So that was the 80s. And through the next 20 years, we'll give them a big window. Because, see, we expect everybody to know something tomorrow, and then the shit that happened 6 years ago, nobody remembers. But the Mike Brown thing was the catalyst for everything that's going on, and nobody wants to talk about my story here. And I'm in the secret city, and we're a twin city, and so is Minneapolis. Hey, nothing is going on here, really. So, here's what else happened. Everybody says hairdresser. But, actually, things like one of my favorite subjects, tattooing, it's not regulated. It's not really licensed. See, the hair industry is licensed, but a lot of people say we should be deregulated. But isn't it funny that our license earned us the ability to be sued when we use a chemical, because these toxic chemicals that we were working with were waived of their liability when it was purchased by a professional who should know how to use it. Well, there's no good way to use it. I mean, I've been bitching about that for years, Very big mouth about what I choose to do and not do as services, and why I have the right to refuse service, which is a big deal because I'm not supposed to be servicing contagious people. And, when you do strangers, you don't really know what their background is, where, the people that I cater to are full well aware of my background, as am I theirs. And they appreciate that. So I do too, and it's allowed me to lead a life that I didn't have to compromise or sell out, which you think people would be into. I mean, on YouTube, you hear all sorts of stories about how you're true to yourself. But my story is stupid, see? And we're talking about this thing, which is really, really serious. But it was so bad the way that our industry had behaved through not only the overplay on the sexuality and the drug use, it's like in the Fridays movies. They say that they don't know when to kick down the door because Baby D is either selling dope, babysitting, or doing hair. Hair has always been made a mockery of, even though originally hairdressers and barbers were some of the early surgeons for necessity, and because if you can be trusted with a sharp instrument, you might be the only one there that could perform a basic skill or service. It's really important about the implements being clean too, of course, when we're talking about these things. So here's what happened next. All of our older barbers are retiring and passing away. And the law with barbering would require them to know how to shave a balloon with a straight razor. A hairdresser wouldn't have to ever work with a straight razor with no guard. A guard, you won't cut yourself, a straight razor, it could really, really be bad. So barbers didn't learn perms, like where you make somebody's hair curly. And they didn't do relaxers, which would mean to make the hair straight. And those are chemicals. And it's like, okay, we're not going to do this kind of deal. And they are. The majority of young barbers who came in were of the color that seems to be getting picked on all the time, which meant that the odds would be more that they would be involved in a lifestyle that wouldn't be suitable to work on the general public. That caused a lot of shit. Because all of a sudden, people were really fighting over something that it was like our governing body didn't really address it even back then. And I get the bigger picture now of why a lot of people say that our State Board of Cosmetology really doesn't do anything to protect the general health of people. They're just collecting fees for licenses. And, going to beauty school when I did, my beauty school teacher knew everybody, so I knew everybody. It only lasts for, a couple decades because those everybody's are older, because they're the peer group that, is in your industry. And back then, you really would have these surprise inspections where they would come in and inspect your tools and your drawers, the floor, the bathrooms. It would be just like a restaurant where you'd see the old movies where the inspector would come in and check the refrigerator and make sure that there were no rat pellets behind the refrigerator. In our industry, they were checking to see if we had formaldehyde at one time, but after they outlawed formaldehyde, well, guess what? We didn't have to use it anymore. Now it reminds me of this whole sea story. You know what I'm talking about with the other thing. Because everybody's crying, this is what's on a death certificate. Well, if you inhale a forced carcinogenic, and then all of a sudden, somebody's using the cancer word or whatever word they're using. See, there's a whole lot of blame. Kind of like you got to ask yourself, how could the Johnson & Johnson crew get a big money grant to dick around playing Virus King when they had that major lawsuit over the baby powder and the talc? And it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like you think, me as a hairdresser, thinking, how can all of these things be so bare bottom basic and nobody knows about them? And I knew about it 30 years ago, and then somebody goes, fuck you, hairdressers are stupid. And it's like, oh, okay, and I'm not supposed to be able to talk about health or wellness or anything that would pertain to my licensing and expand it beyond the average. It's like it's illegal or something to do that, right? I can't believe that YouTube would let Mr. Touchdown's comment be like seen for the world about there's a meat shortage and Mr. Rankles would go for serious cash because he is prime grade A fucking meat stuff. Oh, Lord, he's big, isn't he? Sometimes he really smells bad, and it's tragic, but he has a rotten ear, and Ian does a really great job treating it. So does Joe. I don't do it. Girls don't have to do all the hard jobs. This whole smiling thing, man. I'm not sure about smiling. It's one of those things where it's more like face reading. What does that smile mean? Because, smiles are a dime a dozen, kind of like, somebody's eyes. It's what's going on behind that action, right? Or maybe it's not. Maybe that's not what people are wanting to find out. You keep hearing the stories, people do want to know, but I'm not so sure. I haven't even played a song yet. What kind of drug is that? What kind of drug? I don't eat them too. Hey, and I don't eat meat. And that's not anything like saying nana boo boo. I'm just saying that I did that for my blood type, and I didn't like how they murder animals and then have us eat them. I didn't. I didn't like it. I didn't like it a long time ago. I didn't need to come into the fucking 21st century to know that. And when I was growing up, my dad was such a pain in my ass. He used to tell me, that he was going to move me out to the country and I was going to learn how to wring a chicken's neck. I'm like, no, I'm not. It's never going to happen, Dad. Um, Kind of like years later when he got his farm, way out, and God love him, he got cheap land. He didn't know it was like a town that was run by basically crack, like it wasn't a very, uh, it was, I guess, pretty backwoods, and I don't know, but, my poor dad, he didn't know. He was kind of like just a tight ass, but he'd say, well, you're gonna come out here and stay. No, I'm not. I'm staying right here. This is terrifying enough. I mean, some of the country stuff, is kind of comical, but um, nobody hear you scream out there, right? And I've got my dad's police whistle for tonight too. What kind of drug is that? I think you mean what kind of dog is that? They call Mr. Wrinkles a Basenji. It's a basset hound and some other kind of dog. He had a brother. He's in the big dog playground, or that nice farm somewhere else. He got old. Wrinkles, stop! Oh my gosh. Wait, they let you talk about eating my dadgum dog, and then they don't want you to say that. See, it doesn't make no sense. Hi, Amy. I guess it's somebody's birthday over in your world. I always like to say to people, happy anniversary on the day you took your first breath on planet Earth this time. I thought it was novel and I liked it. And then I got sick of telling everybody happy birthday because everything was psyoped and the whole thing had went to hell in a handbasket. So to be here such a short time, I mean in computer world with y'all, well, 5 years because I started live streaming in 2015. And to see how it was and to have seen it on the inside and gone through all this wild stuff and to see all these weird changes and then, like the whole, everybody thinks it's funny, here again. Nobody's got the balls to mention, the name Presley. But oh, geez, they mention everybody else's name. And oh, that's so weird. And what can I do? I mean, there's so many people that say what's in a name, but, in the same regard, it's not right to have people for any kind of nefarious militia impersonations of people and making up stories and talking shit. My whole life behind the chair, man, I don't talk shit. And I do talk about sex, and I really have brought information that many people have found useful. I don't see why that would be mocked here again. It just seems really suspicious, doesn't it? And I get everybody had a good laugh and made a lot of money, and now everybody gets to waste more time with these um stories of them getting ready to go to their hearing and all that. Does anybody realize how many people were implicated years ago? And if you think, how fast do things move? And in the end, does nine kinds of hell pop off? I thought everybody realized already that it had to be more important for a civilization to continue and go forward instead of such a waste of emotion. A lot of people are traumatized because they don't care and they don't feel. So, if you pretend like you care and feel as you do your dance, like we've discussed, that really does turn real in the sense that we see it happening every day. It's a word called desensitize, you know. So the more traumas that we experience, allegedly, the more cynical, the less able to trust. And we've seen evidence of that because nobody can trust anybody and blah, blah, blah. And that would be a really fucked up story. If in the end, that these humans are found to be these kind of like alien pod people, that really look good, look like real people, because of the beauty industry, right? Because all faults come right here to ground zero. See, and that's not narcissistic. That's just through the stories. I mean, it's fucking obvious. Why would I even watch other people's stories or listen to anything if I didn't know that? But you see, in the end, that the joke would be on us because the whole time we thought we were modern, this time would wind up being the least civilized we had ever been from all this trauma. Wouldn't that be weird? You never know. Um, Let me show you a couple funny things. One of the movies that I'll shortly talk about tonight is this You Don't Mess with the Zohan, and it's from 2008. And I'm a fan of Adam Sandler, but there's too many traumatic true stories about hairdressing. And then as you're watching it happen, it's like getting beat up twice by it because it looks like that's the norm or the standard, but it's really what they promote that allegedly would be if you were cool enough to be where these people are. And then, of course, everybody wanted to be a player, so they brought Hollywood to them, and especially with social media, it's easy to do it. It really doesn't matter where you are too much, but the whole thing with hairdressers, But I thought this one was funny, and this is a remake of Beauty School Dropout, but he made it to coronavirus, and so here's what's going to happen: is I've got a couple choice videos, and they're going to represent different things, which should not be considered a hairdresser's job. If you want to get specific, we can call it out. We could call it an esthetician, because estheticians require more hours and work with more sharp objects. But I think hairdressers must be the messenger, and then you're back to don't kill the messenger. So this is just a nice, simple warm up. Nice guy.
Our stories had to tell. Us humans don't do well when locked up and unable to see friends. The future's so unclear now. What's left?
Isn't he bright and shiny?
Can't even grab a
What's
drink
up?
out with the gun. Coronavirus. The hell invited you, coronavirus. You are not some normal flu. Now we can't see anyone because we all must social distance. But yes, it is important to save our own existence. Gotta get moving. Everyone's just sitting at home, so be improving. If we all just don't go wrong, so just wash your hands and stay away and don't look like a fool. I can't believe it, but I'm really missing school. Coronavirus. You're taking far too long to fix coronavirus. I'm starting to watch chick flicks. We will listen to the government in hopes to get out sooner. Yes, even most us young ones, we're not all bad. Okay, boomer. Sitting is boring. I want to go out and play. We can't
Good to
keep
know,
boring.
Amy. Thank you.
I know we'll be free someday. So go for a walk or stand and talk at least 6 feet away. Hopefully we'll all see
Front door
each
locked.
other now and then.
Back door.
So much
Thank you.
Would you want some of the rest? Maybe you know it. Play lots of games, don't get depressed. Now we've got a plan for every man. There is no need to cry. Gotta go watch that show about that tiger.
So we'll talk a little code. This thing about washing your hands. You know how people talk about washing your hands when there's blood on your hands? That's this invisible kind of a germ when you metaphorically speak instead of literally speak. That would be code for wash your hands. Now, in the real world, of course, for many years as a holistic stylist, I have always known about the toxicity level of chemical hand sanitizers. And of course, the cosmetology book always refers to, good old fashioned proper hand washing, soap and water. And of course, there's a lot of natural products like Dr. Bronner's. And oh my goodness, you go to the health food store and you could pick from half a dozen. I mean, whatever. It's about reading product labels, and I know people don't have the time for that right now, but it's always been that simple. And when I say that this industry is involved in one of the top 5 most toxic service industries, that's a big deal. To have a bunch of airheads that don't go to big kid college to work with the most toxic chemicals, doesn't that sound like a setup? And, here again, you can take your career or your study of life as far as you want to take it. I mean, people think that smoking is the cause of all things. Like one of my most recent harassers, said, "How dare I talk about this stuff when I smoke?" And it's like, right, see, when I started talking and living this stuff and eliminated 8 out of 10 poisons consciously, well, who is really going to stand there and bitch about the 2 I keep and, call it a cop out, call it an addiction, call it a reason? But this whole exercise is supposed to be about people looking at their own selves and what they choose to do. And my job was supposed to be to help people make conscious decisions or choices, not as someone to be thrown out there to be dissected in such a cruel manner. So, you see the maturity level of people deteriorate more and more. But, from the first video I did, it was all about my voice being too low to be a woman. So, to see the whole setup coming and to see the progression of attack, and then the whole thing about you can't tell a real woman from a man in a dress and some boobs, it's all tragically comedic. But here again, it's all about theoretically what the consumer demands. See, it's not the fault of the people that manufacture that kind of script or that kind of media or that kind of programming. Kind of like the FDA. They don't want to deprive you of your enjoyment of these poisons and chemicals. So when we deal with a big thing like people are dying everywhere, well, come on, honestly, people have always been dying. But if you take my story into account, you have to realize that if from the go they always knew that they couldn't tell if somebody had it at the time of the test, and you can't figure that out in with all this um, word salad about what's going on with our little pandemic, it's it's like an IQ test here again, but you have to ask, well, now we want to know the IQ of the person that administered the test. You see what I mean? It doesn't all fall back on any of us asking honest questions and talking about these things. So, what we are dealing with in one way is a die off from a psyop that started out looking like a racial thing and a sexist thing known as a sodomy sickness. But in the end, we find out it's not just that, like we talked about. So it doesn't matter how somebody gets it. The stigma with having it is enough to destroy someone's life because now people are afraid that they can get it from somebody that they're within 6 feet of. And hopefully, this sex education, which of course was a joke, should have covered that. And I don't know how to say that when someone's immune system becomes to that place of maladaptation, which means it tips from functioning properly to a downhill slide. Usually, there's so many things involved in the downhill slide, and the argument, since people believe in life insurance, would be what will this be claimed as? Because, like insurance, it's always about pre existing conditions, right? And for example, if you take into consideration the Manhattan Westlake land dump, Manhattan Project, all the secret city stuff. I mean, everybody would have a pre-existing condition. See, so they're on a rush now to have a labeling war, and deep down, we should know that the labeling behind race, color, caste, creed, belief has always been a natural thing through the lack of understanding and the fear it creates and the clash of any given culture. For a place that has such a nefarious background with this issue, you could see why there would be so many people that would be angry and want to protest. Um, to realize the agenda that I found along the way after the Trump election and the racial wars that were occurring here in St. Louis through a couple of select projects. What do you say to those people when you say, hey, for real, when the Little Caesars was set on fire and I was watching from the bedroom window and Joe was down defending Church Street where the hair shop was, there were different colored people that got out of that truck. So where do you go with the fight of who did the bad thing? Because clearly those people didn't have a racial issue between them because they weren't all one color. Now, you could get sent in to do a job and be getting paid to just fuck shit up and not like the person you're sitting next to as easy as you could be their friend. It's one of those things, like when a lunatic woman attacked me years ago that was strung out on coke. And my ex-husband said, whatever you do, don't say anything to agitate her. And I was like, you know, Tim, you never know what a crazy person's going to do. And sometimes when an angry, crazy person gets in your face and you back down to them, they take another step forward and keep going for an intimidation tactic. But, you know, it could be too where you stand your ground and they leave you alone and go away. That was what happened with that crazy gal, but not because she wanted to go away. She got caught sleeping in a hair salon she worked at and doing tricks out of the back room. And that's how she left the county. But see, back to the hairdressing, the lifestyle can be very wild. And truth be known, 8 times out of 10, the clients are a reflection of the stylist and they look up to them as information people or trendsetters or people to find out where the action is, whatever they want. Go to their hairdresser or barber and you'll know everything that's going on. Well, here again, there's as much power in that and as much shame in that as being what they call a journalist, because while everybody's grouping people, I thought that individual lives matter. And see, the reality of this is that they don't. That's what the world has been shown. Sometimes I think that they're as surprised as I was to see that because a lot of the time you honestly really just think this must be a joke. And all of these things are going to be explained. But of course, every day goes by and that's not the case. Okay, so the biggest problem we have here is all words are interchangeable, and we know that through the code. So we don't need to discuss anymore about the web bot Omar Corona and why I think Corona is a code word. And at the same time, you know that Spanish flu has that word in there. And the whole idea of time is irrelevant in this story because it keeps looping. And we're talking about hygiene. So if people are lacking hygiene, but it's not politically correct to speak on it, then you could see why someone like myself would be an easy target. The hair industry was always too flamboyant for my liking, but like I said, it was really all about a show and about money. So, with that being said, this is just really bad. So, I've never seen so many of what I can only say is illustrated in this video by these nasty queens. And they're going to do a thing on stage. And the only reason I bring that up is because that is, and always has been, an essential in parties at hair shows. So, back again to how things spread. Now, here's what I'll say about this. The biggest thing I learned on YouTube was how many men that behave this way are really in serious pain. And most of them have been addicted to pain meds. And are kind of tortured and bullied. But if you get a bunch of groups that behave like this, and they want to take control, I mean, isn't that just like the bipolar opposite of these stodgy old men and women in these dork-ass suits that can't even say their own speeches? See, and of course, only lowlifes, hookers, and whores wind up making any good money at doing hair because they're incorporating other things in their services. I was watching a gal getting ready to open up her salon in the ritzy part of LA, and of course they were asking her, how are you going to handle keeping people separate when you're used to doing multiple people at one time? And she says, well, you know, that's the only way we really make any money. Now I'll tell you this, with the prices they're pulling down, that absolutely cannot be true. It really can't. And I heard the same argument for years in my industry about why people wouldn't use an enzyme developer. And I'm saying the real cost for you is 75 cents an ounce. I mean, if your clients are going to get better hair color and you're a tight ass and you don't want to spend any money, you just want to cover your cost, your client wouldn't pay $2 more. I mean, you know, part of the marketing scheme was that you could increase the price of your color. I mean, $20 to $50 by using this. See, so it depends on who you're selling to and what you're talking about and who your target market is. So if you find out that once upon a time small businesses were taken over by corporate interest and different things, and you get to a place where your only options are corrupt, and then you rebel against that corrupt structure, well, how and who and why for small business? But see, that was always the real thing that was happening back since the 80s. So not only was I learning about cocaine and this great mystery where people were dropping dead like flies in the group that I was now learning about, which here again was the cosmetology industry. I can see why, like I was saying, it really depends on the clientele you're servicing and the exchanges you're having with people. So you can see how, if there was going to truly be any kind of reform in any service industries, that would now become something that would be given no more energy. The idea of pulling a card and saying, but that's not fair because of the other people. Well, everybody is on an individual basis. And back to this, let me tell you something that's a trip. This is mind blowing. So, like I was talking about the barbicide, right? And here's a bottle of barbicide. It is a germicide, a pseudomonas, a fungicide, and a viricide. What we do with it is only one thing, and this is what we do. So you have your official jar, you see, and you put water in the jar. like this. So you put your water in the jar, right? Now, what's going to happen is you're going to wind up putting your combs and your implements in this jar. So remember, the combs are going to take up space, right? And you're always mixing this to a certain color of blue. It's not about how many ounces. And of course, this stuff is expensive. So I was trained by a stickler, and I'm a little excessive, like you guys know. But you might see it lighter than this. And here's the kicker to this story, because we were talking about formaldehyde. You remember the pickling stuff that we had in our drawers. When I went to the supply house the other day to pick up my order, and I was talking to people that I've known for upwards of 35 years and that are in this industry, believe it or not, the government has allegedly sequestered all barbicide, which means hairdressers can't get any right now. Okay. Hairdressers can't get any barbicide. This is what the salon industry, as per the instruction and demand of the State Board of Cosmetology, which means every governing body, you know, I guess there'd be 50 of them, right? But they say you have to have this to do business. Now, what it's for when it's mixed like this is it will kill any bugs, whether they are visible or not. Okay. And when you take your combs out, it's really important that you rinse them, because, you know, if you just tap them off like this and hit somebody's hair, I mean, there could be a dead bug in their hair, right? And people go running for the door. It's kind of like the minute you hear about a case of lice, everybody's itching for days. But see, you're not supposed to do somebody's hair when they have lice. And in the meantime, you know, I'm a stickler for the rules. And by law, what we're supposed to do is put a plastic bag on their head and make them wait outside for a ride. I only had one freak out on lice. I mean, in my shop. And this old gal, we used to call her the Queen of England, because, you know, she had that accent and she was very pompous, and, you know, she was an old rich gal. But anyhow, we loved her. The one time when I went to do her hair, I freaked out because I saw something crawling. And I immediately bagged her. And I'm saying, now look, I'm not saying that you have lice, but there is something crawling in your head. and it was a tick. But you know what? Better safe than sorry. And in my real life, you know, before the Hair Emporium, I worked for a corporation, you know, and they were cheap and all they cared about was how many haircuts somebody would wham out. And, they took girls out of beauty school because that's a good job to get right out of school. But the one day there was this girl, and I knew her from beauty school, and she got one of the group of kids because, the mom would come to get the kids' haircuts or whatever. And you have to remember that it was the doctors that would tell the moms the only way they're going to get these bugs out of the kid's head is if you have their head shaved at the hair shop. Oh my God. You can't do that. We can't do that. Hairdressers can't do that. Those things can jump 3 feet. So when we're talking about, bugs, this is really like a bug infestation. And come to find out, invisible bugs easily can wind up places we don't expect, like a computer, and infect somebody. Isn't that weird? So the whole thing is ate up like a soup sandwich. And what that means is it is so fucked up that there's no way it could be real. And it's the very thing we see happening. But this all goes back to just like the world didn't end in 2012. In Y2K, the whole grid didn't shut down. Well, they full well knew that they were predating the event to use it to debunk and traumatize and use as a possible scenario in the end. So it's like you get more options, see? But here again, all I see is bullshit popping off everywhere. And, whether it's the TV or the news or the internet, everybody finds a reason to know it's not worth watching. And then you think, well, how could a whole civilized, culture here again with all these multiple platforms all be shit? And I've gave you the answer, which it would be that, because everybody got hit on the head with a rock and got a couple doses of poison, they didn't care about the outcome. So they let somebody talk them into almost fucking the whole world up. And then the Scrooge thing comes along and says, here's your whole life, and you get 2 options. All this can be wiped and you can go back and do the right thing. Or say la vie. And, they said that back then about 20% of them said, get me the fuck out of here, man. Turn me to dust. Do whatever you gotta do. I'm done. Fuck everybody. And they said, okay. So, out of the ones that came back, the percentage is way more than I could have ever imagined of the main players that keep doing it, although the majority of them really do fall off. And so I'm glad about that. I'm just always amazed of the perseverance of the perverse. To me, that should already be miles away. Much love, Amy. Oh, for all those people that love 1111, you know, of course it's 1111. This next one is where we're going to get into specifics with dangerous things that should never be made fun of. And when I first saw this little girl, I couldn't believe how stupid she was and how many millions of people were watching. And she was like a beauty school dropout. So some channel by the name of Snoot Boot put this up. And seriously, I mean, here again, it's funny how many people mock and drag and ridicule key YouTubers that are very popular. And they're actually encouraged to do so by that YouTuber. Kind of like Ms. Wonderful and all the crap makeup and all the Jeffree Star and all the palettes and all the horse shit. Or her friend Perplexed, you know? It's perplexing because now what you're doing is you're sending a lot of tainted products through the mail, and it was always a big thing, you know, kind of like at the airport. Your shit's got to all be airtight and packaged properly. But somehow YouTube made it all possible. And I don't mean YouTube specifically. I mean online internet marketing and PR and all this weirdness that goes back to the beginning of my time here. But let's focus on what we shouldn't do. Let me turn the light off. It's 11:14. Everything's nice and quiet and frozen for now. This is Jenna Marbles. Maybe some of you guys know her. So we'll be talking about artificial eyelashes, the toxicity of certain cosmetics, using bleach around the eyes, toxic pigments, glitter, teeth bleaching, anything that's part of the bullshit and illusion. Those would be little clip-in extensions. And of course, it's red. It's always a mockery of redheads. You know they can't get to heaven. when guys look better in makeup than girls, you can see what insanity breaks out, right?
Hell yeah! What about this says blowjob to you?
One of the first things I want to say about that video is it reminds me of a direct kind of mocking of a real thing in my life, which is when Lauren glued all those white things, they were like foam little cylinder rectangle, and she glued them all over her face and she acted like she was meditating. And I've shown a picture of that in the past. But, the whole idea that if you are engaging in any kind of toxic and dangerous services within the beauty industry, that should not be a business to reopen. It spreads a different kind of contagion. So one of the first things would be these artificial eyelashes, and I've given all the down and dirty details about them, but the bigger question that we should focus on is, where do they get human eyelashes to affix to a seam that becomes an eyelash strip? I mean, you don't lose eyelashes quick enough, by going, oh, if I save 500 of them, I can get $5. So let's look at the code and all of this nonsense. And the other thing about any hair that's on the face, so we're talking about eyebrows and eyelashes. That hair is to protect the mucous membrane. So when you shave off your eyebrows, you could see how you could get more contagion, more germs, more bacteria, more all around nasty shit in your eyes without having eyebrows. And this eyelash thing, when you lose your real eyelashes and you clog those pores and those follicles where hair used to grow out, that will lower the immune system. So sometimes beauty can be deadly, and I have a lot of books in my library about many chemicals and many treatments and preparations that have been toxic down through time. And that's why I do have to differentiate in salon businesses and give my professional stance on it, because to me, it's like anybody would know that, but I guess they don't, and they're not thinking. Or they're kamikaze fungus carriers. And see, those are the crazy fucks that the worm has already eaten in their brain, right? And even though they have fungus, they go to the pedicure spa. And because the people need to make the money so badly, they go ahead and risk cross-contamination. Now, in my business also, a real salon that would be what you would have to consider a med spa med spas are going to do more tattooing of cosmetics, piercings, liposuction, laser hair removal. See, that's not a hairdresser. Those are two different things. And here again, there are rules and regulations which would come into play that would not be what you would consider a cover situation. And people are trying to cover things up. And that offends my spirit because I never even wanted to be a hairdresser. And like my true story goes, I got a scholarship to go to beauty school on the day I was graduating because nobody else wanted it. And my guidance counselor figured I would have a hard time being a secretary and following rules like sit in my seat and don't talk. And I was way more artistic and talkative to be a hairdresser. And I said, you know what? You're right. I'll chance it for $600. So it was a blessing, but in my foolish mind, while I was worried about um, being accepted for hanging out with a old woman psychic that said I was her legacy, I was trying to fit into being a normal hairdresser. And here again, that's a joke in itself. So there's a lot of pitfalls to being happy, but the truth of it is that I was never compromised, nor did I ever sell out, and still have not and will not. They've never really had to deal with a population that's now out of work, and they have to decide what the hell they're going to do about it and what they're going to put any kind of hope or belief in. And I would surely hope that it would be ethical business, but in the end, even the guy that wrote the book that I found so much belief in, even he kind of got worn out and torn down and even a little pissy. But we don't know why. And so here again, it looks like people are being taken over with a mind virus. And there's a lot of dancing with the words. And here again, humans have always had a hard time with talking about aging or change. And that's an odd thing. I'm afraid that the toughest thing about these flus is that they always mutated and changed, or the people that are the experts on them always choose the wrong one to give every year. And that doesn't leave you with very good options either when you think about really who has the information that we need. But I do know this is that in any business that is dealing with any of these little public service needs, there are autoclaves and dry sanitizers and heat sterilizers, and there's all sorts of equipment that at one time was well known in my industry. It seems like, I would say, probably the 70s, that you might see them in salons. A lot of the time they were unplugged. like a lot of things. And maybe that was an electricity shortage or some kind of thing to do with the gas crisis or just saving money. I'm not sure, I was too young. But in the modern day salons, that seems like that would be on a list of things. And, the whole idea back to who can do what, where, and when. It's really hard to take any modern salon and separate hair services, non toxic as well as toxic, and smells and odors, um, and also the idea that different cultures are used to smelling different toxic things. So when you mix that up, I'll put it this way, when Caucasian people started having their hair straight ironed, and the first time they smelled hair smoking and burning, that wasn't a smell that that person would have ever tolerated, but they would tolerate hairspray. And allegedly, the reason why so many hairdressers died was from the hairspray. The hairspray in the cigarettes, see? So there's real truth in that. But there's so many other things that are doing it behind the scenes. And so back when we talked to or towards this opening of businesses, we surely should not be tolerating anyone mocking any industry, including hairdressing. And I think it's always been mocked. That's always rubbed me wrong. And I spent a lifetime speaking out on it. So when I talk about this die-off, I don't mean it to insult anyone's intelligence, but considering I was amongst the first people that ever even heard about this plague where there was a die-off that had already happened. Well, when you look back in history, I mean, they said that's what Rock Hudson passed stuff. But, in the meantime, you have to realize that they said John Wayne died from his smoking. And I know that the autopsy said he had an 8-foot tapeworm. So I still vote for the idea that these invisible bugs are what is freaking people out the most. And so, with saying that, this Zohar movie, I've got a couple little quick things. And this says it all, and then we'll take it back to social and communicable ailments. But it's not a disease, it's an ailment, right? Hang on, I know I don't even have it towards you. I'll start again. All right.
He said it was urgent. It's an emergency, please. Pick up. Whoa! Yes. Well, that's not a real problem. You can always shave it. No, not the bush. No, inside the bush. Look, deep down. In. He lays in there all day long. Maybe it needs
Okay. So we surely don't want to step in anything racial. Let's just try to keep it hair for a minute. Hair is one of those kind of industries where if you want to flirt with somebody, a lot of people feel safe going to a hair shop because there was a difference between the guys that flirted with women, but the guys that really wanted to be with men, versus the guys that were kind of like gigolos to all the women. There was always a big difference between those two, which was the preference, of who they were going to get paid from and get involved with. That was a big deal. This Zohar movie, he winds up being a Russian spy or something, or he's trying to get away from Russian spies, but that's why I said, oh my gosh, we better be careful because we're moving too fast and we're going to get into something racial. But this next clip, I'm pretty sure, is going to say the theme of the movie. So let me see if it does. This isn't it. But he leaves his country and he comes here to be a hairdresser. And this is that movie clips thing. I hope I don't get in trouble for that, but let's see how we do. So the lady just got serviced in the private room, which means he gigoloed himself up, right? And that's like what I was saying with this. Let me turn this down. Yeah, I'm just not very graceful tonight. And of course, the song is what you get the strike on, so we don't want the song on anyhow. He's in his underwear doing hair, and the old ladies are all just like so excited they can't barely stand it. And one of the big things that's going on now, to take it out of the hair arena and quit picking on hairdressers for a minute, is the idea that all these people that fantasize about sex or have these safe flirtations or these online affairs, I mean, it can't be like really like this in real life without everything collapsing. And so it really is like this behind the scenes in certain salons, but it's not in others. And see, that's why I'm saying back to the individuality. To me, the restructuring of business would take that into account. And for anyone that was positive of whatever, they'd be fine to be with other people that were into that and positive in that. But to say that everybody has to be into that, see, now you're dancing around in all those amendments and rights and politics and arguments and wars. And that's why it's really, really hard to talk about this, because like in the last shot of that scene we were watching, there's a dude who everybody wants to associate with John Paul Mitchell, which is a hairdressing line. And they've also had their own cosmetology schools and stuff like that. But anyhow, that dude there that everybody wants to think is John Paul Mitchell is John Paul DeJoria. And, back years ago, and this would have been the early 90s, something happened to Paul Mitchell and he passed and they set up a foundation. But it was kind of like this other guy stepped in and took over the company, and it's kind of like who's the real Slim Shady kind of a story again. But hairdressing tales have always involved like high profile kind of news stories that would have all the gossip that winds up not only getting played telephone with, but purposely told incorrectly. I just think that there really is responsibility in that, and I know a lot of people mock it, but we all have a right to be and do and say whatever it is that we need to bring forward. And I don't care how many people act like it's a joke. This is a serious thing going on. And I do think that when it's addressed positively, that maybe it does help. I know there's a lot of people that would say otherwise, but here again, I feel like that is way too much opposition to just be a personal opinion. I feel that to be a major agenda. Oh, good evening, Sugarcane. How are you? No. The world is. I know it's imploding, but it's not, isn't it? What the hell is going on? You seem to know somebody. You seem to know a lot of people, and you yourself seem to know what the hell's going on. And I've been asking this the whole time. And tonight we're talking about what it was like for me to be a young hairdresser and go into an industry that would wind up being so closely associated to everything bad and dirty and rotten. And why I'm irrelevant, I guess, because, I take my career serious. I don't really know what's going on. I was scared to come on tonight, I didn't know if we were going to have a riot here in St. Louis or in Ferguson, because you see earlier I saw some footage that didn't smell quite right to me by someone that I actually know and that I care about, and that I saw get taken over by the spider monkeys or whatever the hell happened. And they were gonna cross Highway 70, which is a major highway here in Little Podunk, St. Louis. But the next thing that I had heard along the way is that they were going to be down by the Loop. And the Loop is where Blueberry Hill, Chuck Berry, Rocky Horror Picture Show, one of my favorite places, right by Forest Park. And, it's always been one of those places that either the gangs were fighting for or for the wealthy people to take over all that land by eminent domain. Weird place. Always, always such conflict between city county lines, between free and slave, between right and left, up and down, um, and all these terms that I find irrelevant. But of course, I'm stuck in the political hellfire, and believe it or not, hairdressing is every bit of the same mix of politics and reality TV that I would have ever believed. And I was just glad to be online tonight, so if anything popped off, I could say, peace out, man. For real. When you live through a riot and you live through people setting fire to, it's like, this was fucked up. So tonight, that daggum Jimmy Dore, what he was basically saying was pretty much that all cops were fucked up. And to me, that's like saying any group would be fucked up because they identify with that group. I think it's the most hateful, terrible thing to say about any group of human beings on the planet. But anyhow, what he was saying as he was hollering was that, you thought cops got into it because they wanted to help people? If they wanted to help people, they would have been a fireman. And I knew the code he was sending me. Because, see, when they set fire to the Little Caesars right next to this house, it was a fireman, allegedly, that said to me, don't worry about it. You'll get paid. You need to get off the property. Like when they tell you to get the hell off your own property, and I refused. Because I don't really believe that was a fireman back then. I believe it was an actor. And there really was a fire set. And it really was a mixed group of white people and black people in the truck. And I don't remember if there was two of this and one of that or vice versa, because I was terrified seeing the town set on fire, and the Little Caesar and down by the hair shop was the first two fires that were set that night. So, all I could do was cry and grab a hose and turn it on, because not that it's about insurance, which I don't believe in the first place. See, the technicalities with insurance, like when the town was hit in 2011 with the tornadoes, and we were hit. Everything was quiet, wasn't it? When that happened, it was hard enough for people to collect what was owed by the insurance. That was a major hit. But, you only can make a claim every so many years. without getting canceled. And I don't know if it was 3 years or 5 years, yickety squack, but the point is it's not about getting paid. And that's why all these stories of these lawsuits amaze me, because I think it would be so much easier to liquidate the assets, only half of them, of all the people that are guilty at every level in this collusion, because there is a world to rebuild. There are things that need to be done. And it seems like all hell's breaking loose. And people want to argue about the right to carry when there's people that are firing aimlessly on the streets. It seems like, here again, the focus is in the wrong place. You have to be agile enough to defend yourself. You have to be knowledgeable enough to know how to operate a weapon and clean it. You need to have enough decency to not try to pick people off. And that's what's been going on. Every individual life matters. There is no such thing as what C.W. Whitey calls white privilege. That's such an insult. And I've never known white privilege. And I don't think an albino has ever known white privilege. And I don't think a lower middle class white child has ever known white privilege. So here again, it's a hate thing. It's a prejudice. And we're at a point, if we can't admit that there's more mixed people on the population pool that are getting beat up by their own, no matter what they are, it's abusive to humans. Some of us may be easier to genetically code than others. But here again, none of these things were ever meant to bring death and destruction. And that's what it feels like. And if it's a movie, I'm so fucking tired of it. And if it's a joke, I'm not laughing. And to all the people that got caught in this rat trap, I never knew about it. And that's the saddest thing. I mean, I had seen it all. So, while we have the whole story about people being fact checked and they're very upset, you know, whether it's Trump or whether it's Dorr or whether it's whoever, there's so much going on. And George Webb is way in over his head, although, you know, he's another one of them, used to work for the government. And all these people spinning all these stories that know too much for their own good, that are suffering and getting sick. See, you have to realize this is bigger than this other story from my beauty school. This is about something that's been weaponized that affects people on multiple levels. It identifies people quickly. And it might be here again, one of the best things that could happen to anybody that's afflicted with being ostracized for whatever is killing them. And I always had the nightmares about, the Hitler and the Nazi thing. And just like somebody else was talking about today, it's like World War II allegedly ends and the United States picks up the Nazi experiments. I mean, the nightmares and the trauma involved in this and the inability to be taken sincerely or seriously to want to help and to have stories that in the end I mean, will we ever know? And like one asshole earlier today that I listened to and have some kind of a weird, like I thought he was a good guy and I got fooled, but he was crying and bitching and moaning and saying, but he figures he's got 10 more years. And it's like, if life is already so tough now, how do you really even believe in 10 years? And, this whole conversation about these people that push people to doing the unthinkable. It's the very people that are doing it that enjoy talking about it. And you think, okay, I got the game. But in the end, all I know is that the only way I have survived the game was by speaking out against the game in order to put some kind of an ability to survive it. So mine has never been a success story to most people because the money would have made it look successful, or the lifestyle would have made it look successful, or where I lived would have made it successful. But see, that was the whole cover lie they told everybody a long time ago. So in the end, I fall way short of reaching an imaginary goal of, even though doing everything the way I see as right, all the wrong gets to win out. Uh, I mean, in the end, I couldn't say that's strange because I've seen too many supernatural things throughout my life to doubt that this isn't some kind of a nightmare of sorts. And with that, all we got to do is live through however many days. I mean, we've got 4 days going in the other twin city. Everybody's talking about Ferguson, but nobody's talking about Ferguson. And hopefully there's not gunshots all night. Thanks for being here with me. And here again, I think my performance sucked tonight. You want the honest truth. Very hard to focus. Too preoccupied with the real world. And I don't think I was funny enough. So, anyhow, it's been real. And y'all take care of yourself. Please don't get unnecessary services like tattoos right now. Please don't use needles for no reason. And remember, I think safe is an illusion, just like freedom was an invention. So, until next time, it's me, Suze. Good night.